My revenge.
I am pleased to welcome the three of them to this table to talk about this remarkable film. Welcome. Great to see you. Great to see you for the first time here. Michael, likewise. Everybody who undertakes this is a daunting challenge. I don't think there's been a film since when?
1913.
30, and that was silent,
Yes,
right?
it was,
Yeah. Why is that? That nothing has been done to make a play that people consider one of his best?
I don't know. It may be that it's a kind of controversial. Maybe I think that there was a period in the middle of the century when the play was hijacked by certain elements in the world, and it was thought for a moment or two that it wasn't a good play to put on because it's very controversial in terms of its describing of the world between Christians and Jews, and right. I think that people were very, very sensitive about things like that.
Was it automatic you wanted to make it in Venice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you've got Venice, and particularly if you want to set the film in its context, which we wanted to do, because it's a very, very realistic film, if you like, you've got this wonderful place. And it was the most wonderful place in the 16th century.
I think he must know this, and this is the legend, that he went to see Brando, who I knew and who you obviously knew well. Is this a true story?
No.
This is not a true story?
No, I don't think so.
Here is what has been written. This is amazing. And then you said to Brando, who should play Shylock? And Brando said, Pacino is the only person that can do it.
That might have been Barry.
That was Barry Navidi, the producer of the movie.
Oh. Yeah. Went to Brando and said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he told me that just recently. This is an amazing thing. Yes. I didn't know it. Just the other day.
Is this one of the best Shakespearean parts other than Hamlet?
Well, Hamlet, yes, but there's so many. I mean, there's the comedies, the parts in the comedies, and then, of course, Richard III.
Which you know a bit about?
Yeah. Iago claims to be a great role, and I think it is, except it just doesn't resolve itself well, I don't think, at the end. It just doesn't. But there's Richard, and there's Othello, really.
Yeah.
Othello's a great role, and Falstaff.
You'll play in Lear before at some point.
Oh, Lear, yeah. Oh, gee, that's yeah.
That's the one. You haven't done that.
That's coming. No, no. I haven't even thought about doing it. No, it's coming though.
It's coming.
In college theme courses, they always say, "Is this a Christian comedy or a Jewish tragedy?"
Well, to me, it's a tragedy of a man, a character. That was what finally got me to do it, I guess, is because I had in the past no interest in playing Shylock, and I've been offered it a few times, and we talked about that, and I don't know why. I thought I didn't see the role. I saw some brilliant performances as Shylock. I've seen him in London. I've seen him here.
I think Dustin played it in London on
Dustin
stage.
was brilliant. I saw him do it here. So I had my fill of it. I thought, gee, this is wonderful performances. And what does it have to do with me? Until I read Michael Rapid's text, his screenplay, his adaptation of it. And for some reason, when I read that, I felt I knew who Shylock was. I could relate to it. I found I was able to understand where he was coming from, where this character was coming from, and I thought only then that I might be able to interpret it. And so that was, after that, I said yes.
Tell me who he is and where he's coming from. I mean, is it revenge? Is it rage? Is it anti-Semitism? Is it all that?
It's a combination of everything. Because when you take his life, at least the life that I tried to, the before life I tried to give to the character, and in understanding it, I saw someone who was put upon. I was interested in that message of how far can you drive somebody before they, and the background, it's obvious to me in reading Michael's script that you see a man alone, sad, depressed almost. You see a man confined to a ghetto. You see a man who loves his daughter, his only daughter, and the loneliness of that. And in a way, you see this sort of gradation of abuse. And that was what I related to, a kind of persecution that ultimately explodes. Because to me, he's reached his limit. when they take his daughter, and that's how he feels about it. And that's how I saw him, a man with dignity.
He's reached his limit, and there are no limits for him. Right.
Well, that I don't know. Jury's out on that one.
Yeah.
That's something we could always talk about as to whether the pound of flesh and what that means. But I did feel that he was able to maintain himself a lot of dignity in terms of his work. He was quite good at it, and he was proud of it. And in that sequence with Jeremy, who plays Antonio, where he says, "Okay, we'll make this deal. If you don't pay me, I'll take a pound of flesh." So I thought that in that way, he was pretty sure that Antonio would pay him back. It wasn't that much.
Would have the money.
$3,000. He would have the money, and it was his way of saying, "You see, though, but I won't even charge you interest, but we'll just say, let's say a pound of your fair flesh," actually is what he said. It's a kind of little play on it. But he's doing it in a sense to say, look at me, I'm a gambler, in a way. And it's kind of one-upmanship. Remember, we talked a lot about that. And in order to be able to, find a way to be able to say these words, you have to sometimes just supply your own story to it, your own sort of subplot.
You said we talked a lot about it. You talked a lot about the relationship between Antonio and Shylock. You two, as both two great actors who come from different places, though. One from
not really different places.
Okay, fair enough.
Not really different places. We both live in these places, and the human spirit is very similar, depending wherever you come from.
Acting styles don't make a difference to that. You're looking for the human spirit.
Not really. I mean, he carries a gun more than I do, but we were lucky. We had the luxury of 3 or 4 weeks rehearsal before we started shooting, which is very rare when you're making a movie. But meant that we could work with Michael, work with everybody else, get inside the dialogue, get inside the language, understand exactly what it meant, what the options were, what Shakespeare was suggesting, how were those reverberations now in today's world, and how much must we, there's a way of thought. My character is very much a man of his own time, a man of the 1600s, Venice. His attitude, although he's quite a decent guy, actually, but he still spits at a Jew.
That's an amazing scene at the beginning of this movie, when he's walking back and looking at that, and you look up.
And at the end of the movie, he tells him, by way of offering him something, he says you have to become a Christian, which to us now is just a horrendous thing to say, but I think to Antonio at the time, he thought, I will allow this man to have salvation, and I got him in a position where it's like saying to a drug addict, you've got to go to detox. It's going to be horrible. You're going to get through it. You're going to come out the other side, and from Antonio's point of view as a Christian, he'll be able to go to heaven, and that's the gift I'm giving him. And
he's being benevolent,
which is incredible.
I felt that, Jeremy. I really did.
When you put this together, where do you go in terms of how you want to use the language?
Well, the language. I feel very strongly about a certain thing, and in fact, I think that Al does, and I'm sure that Jeremy does too, that Shakespeare is often treated like a dead text. You have to jazz it up. You have to make it exciting, because fundamentally it's not exciting. It's something to be afraid of. Or you treat it with such reverence, you just put on a pair of soggy tights and you recite it as quickly and as poetically as you possibly can. I don't think that. People didn't speak in iambic pentameters in the 16th century either. And they went to the place, and the theatre, Shakespeare was a businessman, and he made the people really enjoy themselves. And I wanted to bring it alive. And so what we tried to do was find a way of speaking it which was very naturalistic. We cut out a lot of the stuff that was words which had fallen into disuse, replaced them a bit, jiggled it around, but not so that you'd notice.
And not many.
And then I had the medium of the cinema, so I didn't have to film people speaking all the time. I could film them listening.
Yeah.
which gives a great subtext and a great depth to the.
How about the lighting?
Venice was a dark, devious, and decadent place, even though it was full of life. That's what it was like, and that's what the light was like. I mean, you have these huge buildings and tiny canals. You only see the sun for a moment or two. The rest of the time it's dark, and people crept around in the shadows wearing masks.
Is this a message for today, and that's the genius of Shakespeare? Anti-Semitism, cultural clashes. And is that what appeals to you? I mean, you had...
Well, for me, all that is there, but for me, it's usually the character, and can I get into it in some way? Can I find a way into this person's dilemma, this person's raison d'etre, whatever? That's really what draws me to material.
And how do you know you find that? I mean, does it come to you, or do you? I mean, is it locked in, or do you?
Well, it's always, you're always taking that chance. You're going to take that chance. But if you feel as though you've got some, there's some format there for you that you can sort of feed yourself into, then you go for it. And as I say, with Michael Radford's text, I felt he had given me certain clues in his adaptation, where I said, okay, I'll give it a try. I mean, that's usually the way I go at something, because there's lots of material I really love, but I wouldn't want to do it because I wouldn't know how. At least with this role, I knew at least how to approach it. I knew that I could be alive when I was involved in it. I could engage myself in it. I could follow it. I could feel motivated in it. I could maybe, hopefully, which is the greatest thing that can happen to you, express myself through it, which, it's the very few roles you can actually do that with. But I thought there was a chance here.
Are you in your head thinking, when you look at at this kind of play, and you know what the climactic moment is moving to, it is the trial?
Yes.
Are you did you shoot this out of order, or as you would normally shoot a movie, or did the trial come early or late?
We shot it quite early, actually, didn't we? It was one of the first things we shot.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that hard?
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly
for
hard
you
if you don't rehearse.
Yeah.
Like I said, rehearsal's very important in film, and not often do you get a chance to rehearse in movies, but with a play, I mean, with The Merchant of Venice, you have to. And we found each other, even if it was over a 2-month period. We found 3 or 4 weeks to get together and rehearse. All of us did, and it really paid off when we were out on the set there. I mean, you just can't do this without it. So it does help. It's shooting out of sequence is something you consider while you're rehearsing. You think about that. So you read the play over and over. In the early days with Lumet, with Sidney Lumet, the early films I made, what really he would rehearse a film like it was a play. So you'd rehearse for 4 weeks, and he would stage it. Yeah. We didn't stage as much as we rehearsed and talked. A little bit we staged, but with Lumet, he would take you right through the entire thing. So when the scene came to shoot, no matter, even if it was out of context and all, and you knew where you were because you'd been through it so much, almost as though you ran it as a play.
Tell me about the relationship with Pacino and Antonio. Because we're going to see a scene of them talking about Portia.
It's interesting. In Shakespeare's day, the relationship between two men was regarded really as the highest form of affection, and it was platonic, and it was what everybody wanted. It was regarded as higher even between a husband and a wife, which is very hard for us to understand, because now we see things as being straight or gay.
Right.
And I said to Joe Fiennes, who plays Bassanio, what would be the difference if I was your father rather than an older friend of yours? And we discovered that there wouldn't be a lot of difference in the nature of the love, but that what's very important in the story is that when Portia marries Bassanio, and then she sees the affection that Bassanio has for Antonio, she has to teach him a lesson. She has to teach him that you can only love one person. So she does a trick on them. And unless there's a real affection there between these two men, she doesn't. Antonio is not a contender. So it's very important that there be that. And it's an interesting relationship because I think it's seen possibly differently by Bassanio than it is by Antonio. There's a moment where Bassanio, which we may see perhaps, where Bassanio kisses Antonio.
Right.
Gave me a real shock when Joe did it. I hadn't expected it. And when I look at Antonio's face afterwards, I think, yeah, he's thinking, you didn't have to do that just because I lent you some money. But the younger man, who doesn't understand love quite such a way because he's younger, he sees love a little bit differently. I think he doesn't quite understand why this older man adores him. Why the older man adores him, I think, is because he doesn't have anybody in his life. He's one of those people who puts all his energy into his work and has left no time for affection, doesn't have a family, doesn't have children.
This is a scene in which Bassanio tells Antonio about Portia.
Her name is Portia.
Tell me about the casting of Portia.
Well, I've always felt that it's a huge part and one of Shakespeare's most powerful women. And the problem is that it's usually cast much older. But in a movie, you can't have a 35-year-old woman who isn't married, particularly if you're doing a realistic version of the 16th century. She's got to be in her early 20s, max. So I was looking for a young actress, and wasn't evident. And then this young girl came in and did an audition, actually to play Jessica. And we were all blown away by her. I mean, just literally blown away.
Talk to me about this idea of you two guys working together. The whole notion of doing great script coming from Shakespeare through a screenwriter, and you got this kind of words to say, and you're playing off of another great actor. That's what it's about.
Yeah, well, you really have to finally break through that.
That whole thing I just said.
Yeah. you can't be thinking about that.
Right.
So you really are trying to make sense of who you are in relation to each other.
Right. So
that
you're thinking of Shylock in relation to Antonio.
Yes, and this is what really the work really entails. I mean, the words themselves and learning them and all, that's just a separate thing. But who we are together and how we respond, even to be able to respond to each other, that one has to clear a path for that.
Yeah.
You have to get through some brush in order to get to it, so that when I look at him, I can see who he is rather than thinking about the words he's saying.
Right.
So that's really the work. And to do it in Shakespeare, the thing that makes that a little more difficult, of course, in the end, if you do it, you have the words of Shakespeare to carry you through. I mean, that's what's so good about it. But what makes it more difficult, I guess, would be the fact that you're speaking in another kind of language, but you're in another world. You're a world that's not particularly familiar to us because we're in the, century, 15th century.
Yeah.
And so we're having to learn about what that kind of behavior was like and what those things meant, the references that we have in the text, and when we talk to each other, we have to understand those. We have to find a way to relate to those. And once you do that, it gets easier to relate, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great for me working with Al. I've always found it the easiest working with a very good actor.
A talent.
Yeah, it's just...
Because the Shylock, I mean, you don't see Al Pacino, but you see a Shylock that is so powerful.
Well, I see him beginning
character.
to knit it together and, making his choices, because all our, what we do really is we make choices.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And to watch, I mean, I sometimes think of myself as a musician, and it's much better to have a Stradivarius than just a, two-bit violin from around the corner. And these are two Stradivariuses, they really are. Even though they work in different ways.
Stradivarii.
It's Stradivarii, yeah, you're right.
Yes, that's right. So even though they work in different ways?
Even though they work in different ways, one in the English classical tradition, the other in it amounts to the same thing.
But in the end, it's like he said, though, it's all coming up from here about...
All you ask of an actor is to bring intensity to the role, and out of that intensity comes truth. And I promise you, they both come onto the set, and you think it's the first movie they've ever been in. They are so focused on what they're doing, and that really, honestly, is all you ask.
Is it like that every time you go out for every film, or does Shakespeare bring out the best in you?
Well, surely a great actor like Jeremy does, and Shakespeare, of course, does. But you try to find the equinox in other films, too. You try to get the same parallels, because what else do you have? So you go for that, and sometimes you're lucky. Most of the times you are lucky, because you find that actors do want to do this kind of thing. It's a kind of, especially in film. I just recently did a film where because you learn after a while that this kind of preliminary work it helps. When you don't do it, you usually are lacking in the film. So after a while, it would be crazy if I didn't take advantage of that with what I do know and the experience I've had. So usually we get together and, we get over the initial introductions and, because we all know each other from before, we have a certain idea of the people. And then we come together as a group and we talk about the piece, and that's what unites us, is whatever that piece is, and that's our sort of sanity together, and that's why we're there, and we focus on that. And sometimes you get out of a movie as much as you put in those early stages, and so one tries to do that, but it doesn't happen often. And when you're making a movie without that, you're sort of usually thinking on your feet, trying to survive, really.
Was this a tough job to cut? And I mean by that because you had so much good material, and yet you had a certain time limitation. It's about 2 hours as it is.
Yes, but my script had already made an awful lot of the cuts. So really, in the final editing, was much easier than it normally is.
We now see the scene that sets up this entire film, sets it up, tees it up for what will come. This is a scene in which Shylock and Antonio and Pacino talk about the loan. Here it is. What?
Thank God for film, though, because you can cut to, you always have the option to cut to the dog,
Yeah, right.
This is great.
Yeah.
But at that moment, knowing what you have to play off of, that line, chosen by me, and you have that sort of...
Well, it's a joke, isn't it?
I don't know. Is it a joke? But that's what you assume that's his response.
Well, I mean, he may be Jewish, but he's a reasonable person.
Really?
Come on. Yeah, I see humanity in Shylock. I mean, I think, and Shakespeare did, which I think is one of, by the way, why it's such a great play. I mean,
Look at this. Pound of your flesh
Yeah.
for no interest. How's that? That's a good deal.
Yeah, but it's like me saying, if you lend me some money, and if I can't pay you back, I'll give you a starring role in my next movie. And then you say, wait a minute, you can't pay.
You don't
dear.
take it seriously, yeah.
It's no. So I think, and I don't think Shylock, if Jessica hadn't gone off, he ever would have.
No, I think he's driven to that.
Yeah.
That's what I think happens.
He's
driven.
If his daughter had not left.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's the linchpin for him.
Well,
Is
for
it
me,
really?
it was. I put a lot of stock in the daughter thing because
Yeah,
I don't know. There's not much time in the Shakespeare play. There's just not much. It happens, and one is always trying to find a way. I would imagine the actors are and the director is to try to make a relationship between Shylock and his daughter Jessica, and you're forced into certain theatrics to do it. But here, when we have movies where we have where we can tell a story without dialogue, or get a feeling that you can feel the love he has for the daughter long before, and also when she's gone, we do something about that too, because we have him discover that she's not there, and we see what he goes through. I think that gives us a sense of his feeling toward his daughter, and that sort of has resonance later on. I think that's what gives him a sort of.
Yeah. One of the things about that particular scene, the pound of flesh scene, is that in Shakespeare's play, because it's really the first time you see Antonio and Shylock meeting,
We're going to see him in just a second and right before the trial.
it's a sort of exposition scene.
Yeah.
So really it's telling the audience what the relationship is between them. But because we've seen in the movie Antonio spitting at Shylock, the scene becomes much more about something else. It's a sort of jousting match between them, and that's what gives the actors the room to move, the room to be subtle about it. And besides, where does he get this idea from? I have to think of things like this. He's got a pound of goat's meat.
Yeah, exactly. And the scales.
And the scales, yeah.
Same
All those things.
Same scales.
Yeah, same scales. And those are the things you can do in a movie which you can't possibly do in the theatre.
Yeah, it's amazing.
See, in the theater, you're just looking at who's talking, who's speaking.
Yeah.
You can't help it. There's the frame of the stage, and you're in the audience, and you're watching, and you're hearing the words. That's why words are so important in theater. But there's certain kind of theater that there's no words in, of course. But primarily, it's the words that are kind of coming through, because that's all we've got. because you're not looking at the guy and the other. You're not looking at Pacino and Antonio, and you're watching that repartee. But in the movies, you can the dynamic changes, which is why more Shakespeare should be done on film, I think.
Why isn't more done on film, you think?
Well,
I mean, was it a hard sell for you, by the way?
It was a hard sell, even with these guys.
because people don't go to see it. That's why.
Because they're frightened. They're frightened of the language. But I promise you, the response we've had to this is that after 5 minutes you forget it's Shakespeare.
I read a lot of reviews. Did you open in London?
Yeah.
Because I read a lot regarding all these papers, and they were just. I mean, they were ecstatic about performances.
Yeah.
You know, a little quarrel here, a little quarrel there, but it was just ecstatic about it.
I think what our task at the moment, and why we're all talking about it, is to get the audience through the door.
Yeah.
If we get them through the door, which will be a big step for them, because they've all been bored by Shakespeare as kids at school and had to study it for exams. And one of the great things about leaving school is you never have to read Shakespeare again. But in fact, he's one of the greatest storytellers. Mm-hmm. And if we can get them to forget their prejudices, go through the door, they will have a great time, and they'll never think about Shakespeare in the same way again.
I mean, just think about the drama we're talking about here. There's a guy loans some guy money. Says, if you don't pay me back, I get to cut a pound of your flesh, which we'll measure. You know, and he's driven by the rage of his daughter running away with somebody he's not happy about.
Which is something that you can absolutely relate to. Which you can absolutely...
Exactly. But that was the genius of Shakespeare, was it not?
That was the genius of Shakespeare.
Jealous, rage, honor.
All those things.
Murder.
But it's essentially human. And that's what I love about this particular play. It's very complex. You can't analyze it in socio-political terms. You have to analyze it in human terms.
Relationships.
In relationships. In human psychology. There's no good people, there's no bad people. They're cruel, they're kind, they're vulnerable, they're sad, all of them.
Did you want to get to the trial quick?
The trial, in a way, is easy, although it's almost fun to shoot because you know what the dynamics of it are,
and you know what you've got to play with,
and you know what you've got to play with. And we set it in this big kind of bear pit with people screaming and shouting and all the rest of it, keep it moving and alive.
Right.
It's what happens after that you have to look after, because the play does go on, and it's not weak. It's about the other things that happen as well, and you have to set those things up so that when they start talking about rings, which represent loyalty, you not only relate it to them, you relate it to Shylock as well, because you see Jessica with her ring, and you find in it all the themes that are in the play of people who've made quick, snap, profound, life-changing decisions and are living with them, and having to live with them.
Roll tape. This is before the trial. Antonio tries to reason with Shylock. Great scene. Pray God Pacino will come to see me, and I
Pay
care.
his debt.
Pay his debt.
Then I care not. I don't mind as long as he's
As long as he knows that I'm paying his debt.
that I'm dying for him.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's because of the relationship of.
Yeah, it's because he loves him, and he thinks, if I'm going to die, and I'm doing it for the love of this man, because I've lent him this money to give him his marriage, which in effect he's done. He's won the girl. And if he's there, then that's all right. I mean, this is a man at the end of his life when he doesn't have anything to look forward to, really.
So it starts there, the very first scene he's talking about.
Yeah.
That. It's sort of, he's preparing you for that very first scene when he talks about his melancholy.
The whole notion of my life is...
Yeah, it's over, really. And if he can kick this young kid on, then...
It gives more meaning.
Yeah, and also if he comes, it'll show he loves me. That I am loved by somebody before I die. It is important.
Here's the scene in which Balthazar addresses Shylock, and in the courtroom, asking for mercy. Roll tape. Tell me how you saw it as a director and what was going on from you to maximize the sort of visual presentation of these powerful arguments.
Well, the first thing is that Lynn or Balthazar or whatever you'd like to call it, Porsche, has to take command of the court.
Right.
And in order to do that, her movement towards Shylock, that walk where she says nothing, is the moment at which she takes command of the court.
Yeah.
Dramatically, that's what it does, and that's, if you like, the camera and the timing taking over. And then I shot it, instead of shooting it in a single, which one would be tempted to do with such a famous speech. I felt that really it's about the tension between the two of them. So I just shot it in a two-shot so that you have her circling around. But you always have Shylock in the shot, taking this in. You can see him taking it in. You're not cutting to a specific shot. You're not making any statements. It feels real because he's standing right there listening to it. And when she finishes, he starts.
Notwithstanding how difficult it is to translate Shakespeare to film. When you think in the context of what you just said and the kind of performances you get, I mean, can you make an argument that sometimes it can be done better on film? Or is it staged so powerful because you're live and you can feel everything and it has a beginning and a middle and an end that you can never, ever...
That's the great argument, really. It was one of the reasons why I thought, should I attempt to do Shylock first on stage? You know, what would be the benefit of that? Would I learn more about who this character is so that eventually when I went to film it with Michael, I'd have some residue of that. So I chose not to do that. I chose to just put myself in his hands and hopefully the fact that I would be adapting to film without having to forget the habits I learned on stage. This would be the first time I'm doing it. And I sort of, I remember speaking with Peter Brook, the great director, and he mentioned that he preferred film, Shakespeare on film, because he said, and you could see Jeremy does it all the time. It's part of what's so beautiful about his performance. He just drops the words. And that's what Peter Brook mentioned about how you can just drop the words. Whereas in the theater, you have to try to communicate them and project them to the third balcony. And I remember Lee Strasberg in his day saying that Shakespeare should be done on television. We can do it on television. And that was a wish of his. As a matter of fact, he was making plans to do that. And I really feel you can sense it in film, especially if you have a film director like Michael Radford is someone who's not directed many plays. You know, he sees the world and he sees a way to present a play through the film vision. And that's very supportive if you're doing a movie of a play, you know, especially if he has a feel for it. So I like the idea of doing Shakespeare on film.
And you?
Yeah, I agree. I think you realize how constricted you are in a theatre by having to knock it out to 1,000 people to make all of them understand. You have to be more generalized. You have to, use different tricks. You use the sound of your voice and modulation so that they can hear things you're thinking. But in fact, to be able just to use the language and have the camera see in your face, because audiences also nowadays, they're used to naturalism. They're used to movies, they're used to television, and so for them, in a way, the theatre can sometimes be, if it's a big theatre, and Shakespeare, because it's a big castle, often has to be played in big theatres. For them, they think, no, that's not real, quite. It's heightened.
There's something
it can take you somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, the Shakespearean theatre can, something like Henry V, can, when you roll that language, it can levitate a whole audience if you have a supreme master doing it. I couldn't do it. But on film, you're freed up as an actor, because you don't have to do all that. You don't have to knock it out to so many people.
And you can use face... and drop the words like you said. Drop the words. Do you... When you... Antonio, where is he at the end of this?
Oh, he's alone. He's alone. He's like anybody who thinks who thinks that they can get their happiness through somebody else, whether it be your children or whether it even be a woman. You have to find your own happiness within you. You can't, and so at the end, of course, he loses. The man he loves goes through a bedroom door with the woman he loves, and he's again left alone. Three lonely people at the end of this.
And where is Shylock? Is he going too far?
He's an outcast, really. He's gone too far, and he realizes it. That's the thing Michael and I had discussed. He realizes at one point that he's taken this too far. He's allowed his rage to lead him, and which happens, and then we're looking at that and thinking of mercy. It's so interesting. What I was thinking of as I was doing it, I remember is thinking, it's your mercy. It's your mercy. It's good for you when it works for you. How about unlocking the ghetto? Huh?
Yeah.
How about taking this red hat off me, and I could wear whatever I want?
There's a key moment when he's speaking to Tubal, where he says, where he's absolutely in torment about his daughter. And incidentally, when he says ducats, I think he's always talking about his daughter. That's my view of it. But he says, the danger never lighted on us until now. Or I can't remember.
I never felt it.
And then Tubal looks at him and he says, I never felt it until now. Shylock's, in his own word, he's on a one-man mission to right the wrongs of humanity. And you can't do that. There are other people in this world who are on one-man missions to right the wrongs of humanity. You can't do it. You can't take it that far. You become a bad human being if you do.
You can only do things that are within your own control.
Yes.
Within your own power.
Yes.
To grant.
Yes.
Mercy. The women in this.
Well, the women in this are... Shakespeare writes great women. He really does. If you think of the position of women in the 16th century, what he has done with women in this thing is extraordinary. First of all, Jessica, who is an absolutely modern creature. She's a second generation living with her father in a minority community. She wants out. She doesn't really get on with him very well. She's 19. She's met a handsome guy. She wants out. And she only realizes what she's done when she only sees the effect, like any teenager, when she's done it. Portia is a girl who is innocent in the ways of life. She's powerful. She's got lots of money. She's intelligent. But she's innocent. She's sought. But she's going to marry the first handsome guy that comes along. And that's going to be her lot, except that she wants more. And when this situation presents itself, she does what only she, because she's got a lot of money, can do, is she gets herself the opportunity to become a man, just for a bit, in a situation where it's not a court of law where guilt and innocence are being decided. It's a plea bargaining situation, if you like.
When you guys come to the opportunity to do this, how long did it take you? A year? What, to do this?
A year, just about, yeah.
What does it do? Does it make you say and think about the kind of roles that you want to make sure you get your hands around? Written by Shakespeare or Chekhov or...
Yeah. Well, for one thing, it becomes something to do with your time,
right?
Because we're not together for that year. What you're doing is you start to sort of sniff around the role and the world of this play, and you find yourself going in and out of it, and then you say, well, I didn't even look at the play for 2 weeks, and then you start. It's a wonderful private time before you start rehearsing a play. I find it's as though you were writing memoirs or a book or something on this character and this play and this world that you're about to enter, and so you familiarize yourself with it. And there's various ways you do it. You do it just through thinking and sometimes reading, of course, because that's right there for you. And you want to find out about that period. It's easy enough. So you have access to all these things, and usually actors will take access to them, and then finally it rolls around to the thing that's going to change everything. It's like learning all about driving, right? You know where the gear shift is, you know where the gas pedal is, and this is where you go with a red light and a green light and all that stuff. And finally, you get in the car, you turn the motor on, and you go, whoa! What's this? There's other cars beeping at you, and that's sort of rehearsal. You do all this other private work, and you just feel like, oh well, I've done the role already. And then you come in and you look at that guy, and you say, whoa, what did he just say? And he didn't do what I thought he would do. And that's the fun of it.
And it gives you more to work with.
Yeah.
But I would assume, Jeremy, that where you are and where Al is, that you're not really looking at other performances, i.e., of other people who might have played Antonio on the stage.
No,
because you are so looking for your own.
Yeah, in fact, I tend to avoid, certainly in the major roles, Shakespearean roles, I don't want to see other people.
If you knew that Olivier had done it,
I wouldn't search it out.
You wouldn't search it out.
Because you have to make these guys your own.
Yeah.
And seeing other people, it's like if you play. I played a character once who existed in a movie, Klaus von Bülow.
Yes.
And I just didn't want to meet him because I thought I don't want to meet this person. I'm this person. And that's what I had to get myself to believe and get the audience to believe also. Yeah. So I tend not to watch other performances, maybe wrongly, although I know this play well.
From just seeing it because you want to go see a production.
Sure, but when I saw it, I didn't think I was going to play Antonio. When the chance came, you don't have many opportunities to play Shakespeare.
Speak to that. You just wanted...
Yeah, I wanted to get it. Maybe in the last 10 years there have been sort of 4 or 5 Shakespeare's made. I was in none of them. He is a writer. He's a writer who writes to such a wonderful depth that it's a joy for an actor. There's so much to mine. So many ways to do it. It's unlike much film writing, which most film writing is actually quite shallow and plot driven, isn't it?
It's the human condition.
That's what it is.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Done better than anybody ever.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? You?
Man, I guess you just had to be there at the time
to know.
Who knew what was going on then? And what was in the air.
Well, you had Marlowe.
This is 1596, right?
Yeah. You had Webster and Marlowe. And
Not a patch on there, really.
You what?
They're not a patch as far as the real human condition.
Yeah.
I mean, they were great about blood-curdling stories.
Yeah. Well, this play was based on the Jew of Malta, wasn't it? This Marlowe.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Well, it was it was actually, I think, based on an actual court case that happened in Venice.
Really?
Yeah, and the Bassanio Portia was a separate story. I mean, there were 2 stories he read.
There were 2 stories.
Because Shakespeare never went to Venice.
If Shakespeare wrote it.
If they didn't, he did write.
Wait, hold on.
Go.
Here we go. Bear with me. What's the compelling reason for you? Because I just had a Shakespearean scholar from Harvard say, there's no question. No question.
Yeah, all these stories come from books, often in Italian, often in Greek. All Shakespeare stories, pulled them. He left no signature, which means he probably didn't write, which means he probably couldn't read. Certainly his wife and his daughters were illiterate. There is no sign that he ever travelled further than from Stratford to London and back. Edward de Vere spent much of his youth in Venice, Italy, spoke Greek, Latin, was extremely well read, had access in his youth to enormous libraries where he would discover these stories. And I could go on and on.
All right, thank you. Great to see you.
Nice to
Great to see you. Congratulations. It's a pleasure.
Thank
Really is. Merchant of Venice opens December 29th. Jeremy is also in Being Julia with Annette Bening, which is still in theaters.
Still around, yeah.
They're remarkable performances and a remarkable opportunity to see great words said by talented people, directed by Michael. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.